Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you've enjoyed lunch. And for those who are new to the programme, welcome to you. Welcome to the WorldSkills Leaders Forum 2011, held in conjunction with the 41st WorldSkills competition here in the City of London. For those of you here this morning, you may hear a little bit of a repeat during this introduction, but do bear with me as we welcome in our new set of delegates into this afternoon's session. I'm Nadine DeRaza. I'm chairing the conference this afternoon. You'll see from the notes that I'm a business presenter and chair and worked for all sorts of broadcasters and publications over the years, including the FT, CNN and Sky. But I've had a great privilege of being able to put something back into UK PLC by serving my time on the board of WorldSkills London 2011. It's a position I do voluntarily, and I'm very pleased to be here this afternoon chairing this forum as well. And this forum really does bring together some of the world's most influential thinkers and policymakers of international skills ever held. And we've got ministers here from many countries from around the world, corporate chief execs, which I'm looking forward to meeting some of them later, senior civil servants, and also some world-class educationalists. So wherever you've travelled from, whoever you represent, a very warm welcome to all of you. And the WorldSkills Leaders Forum is supported by WorldSkills International Global Industry Partners, and we're meeting a few of them later on as they take part in the presentations and the panel discussion, and also to City and Guilds, so thank you to all of you. Now, this forum is an annual global event aimed at really making the most of the WorldSkills International Global Network to meet the needs of industry and commerce and those who train them, really to the mutual benefit of all of us concerned. And as well as being a great networking event, the forum should also provide you with some really practical information. So this morning I urged the speakers, and I'll do the same for this afternoon, that I'm looking for examples of transformational success. I just want you to inform people what's going on. We want to see concrete examples of what's going on within the skills arena, those transformational success stories, policy and practice, real evidence of innovation, impact and return on investment. As a result of being at the forum, I'm sure you'd like to find out what you can do back wherever you're from, to your countries, to your businesses, to your people, in making sure you get the skills that we need now and for the future to drive that economic and business success. We have a fair amount to get through this afternoon, so timekeeping is of the essence, which really is a hint, again, to the speakers taking part, not to go over their time allocated. And what we've decided to do, I hope you don't mind this, we had a break scheduled for about an hour's time, but we thought we'd rather actually carry on with all the presentations, the panel discussion, and we'll finish slightly earlier, giving you a chance to go into what is a fantastic event here at Excel, to see the competitors in action, if that's what you want to do, because I'm sure some of you have come here from there this morning, and when I first saw the competitors in action yesterday, it did bring a tear to the eye. I was a bit of a wuss, but it's been such a long time coming to London, that the WorldSkills community holding these amazing competitors from all around the world, it can't help but reduce you to feeling a sense of pride in watching them all. So the catalyst today is really behind, for the World Leaders Forum, is the Harvard Graduate School of Education report entitled Pathways to Prosperity. And if you haven't read it, then please do read it after this event. It really is a wake-up call to us all, particularly focusing on the US, and we'll be coming up against that later on, actually. So during this morning's presentations, if you were here, we really focused on the UK. This afternoon, we're going to shift the perspective. We're going to have a look more globally, and we've selected a mixture of developed and developing countries from all around the world to address the impact that vocational training and apprenticeships has on economic growth. And following on from the presentations, we will have a panel discussion again, and once more you'll have the opportunity to pose questions to the panel. Again, I'll go through that format later on. But still sticking with the UK before we start reaching out more globally, as this is the host country, I'm delighted to say that our next presentation will be from John Hayes, who's MP for Minister of State for Further Education, Skills and Lifelong Learning. And it's a position he took up when the new government was formed in May 2010. In addition, in July of this year, he became a Minister of State in the Department for Education with particular responsibility for apprenticeships, careers guidance and vocational education. And I know John is a huge champion of skills, having heard him speak previously. And this presentation will have a look at the way Department of Business, Innovation and Skills have really put their commitment into WorldSkills London. They've been a huge sponsor and supporter of this event, giving significant funding. So I'm delighted to welcome, please join me in showing your appreciation for John Hayes, MP. Hi, John.
Thank you very much. Very good to see you. Thank you.
Nice to see you. Welcome to you.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's a great delight to be here. And as you've already heard, I'm the Minister for Further Education, Skills and Lifelong Learning. And as a result, have responsibility for these matters in Britain. And WorldSkills is really the summation of so much of what we've tried to achieve in respect of driving skills up our public policy agenda, up the political agenda. But can I start by welcoming everyone here to London? I know that both Vince Cable and Martin Donnelly welcomed you this morning, and I'd like to add my warm welcome to theirs. This has been a long day and is likely to be so. I have had a chance to start to look round at some of the competitions. It's an immense size. I mean, just the physical dimensions of this building and the range of activities that are going on in it is awe-inspiring, and I'm sure you feel the same. I also know that for those of you whom English is not your first language, these things are never straightforward, but as well as that, I think just stamina and concentration will be required to get most out of these proceedings. Nevertheless, as well as the being struck by the scale and size of the event, I was inspired, as I'm sure you have been and will be, by the people involved. Both the competitors, the teams, those who've trained and taught them, and all those that are visiting too. Just to see everyone from young children to those of us who were once young children, but that seems a long time ago, was, I found this morning, incredibly inspiring, moving. I think what I feel, and I hope you feel too, is that events like WorldSkills prove yet again that skill and indeed knowledge characterizes not a single culture, but all cultures. That's why learning is so precious. From the astrophysics postgraduates who are doing research at Cambridge to the working people who decide to take up a skill at their local church hall through adult and informal learning. Learning and skills change lives, and so change communities, change cultures. Upholding the value of learning in all its forms is an important means of building societies of which we can be proud, and informal learning, through to the kind of formal learning that we've spoken about in respect of apprenticeships, for example, can do so much to improve our shared cultural, economic, social, and spiritual well-being. There are few, if any, countries represented here that do not share that perspective, don't, I think, share those aims. And though approaches obviously differ according to local traditions and local circumstances, I think we're united by our understanding of the power of learning. But I want to say a little more about practical learning. You see, there may still be some, not in this room, not at this competition, I hasten to add, who don't yet grasp the significance, the life-informing, enhancing power of practical accomplishment. Anyone who comes here and sees what's happening here could no longer suffer from that misconception that practical learning doesn't deserve its place in the sun. For me, those who gain practical competencies, who achieve what the competitors here have already achieved just by being here, can't help but conclude that through practical skill, not only do individuals grow, but whole societies are bettered. Now, for example, in England, we're currently devoting a great deal of attention to adjusting the balance between central government control and local discretion, and that's a particularity around our public policy. The need for common standards and guaranteed quality is being balanced with the need for providers and learners to achieve the flexible, dynamic provision they need to serve their local communities and economic need. Other countries have other priorities, which we sometimes find it hard to understand. Of course, I can't possibly understand all of the local imperatives that inform public policy in all the countries that are competing here today. Indeed, it may be true, as the English writer and intrepid traveller of the last century, Dame Rebecca West, once wrote, that, quote, international relationships are preordained to be the clumsy gestures based on imperfect knowledge. Certainly we can look around the world today and see in how many places the will of people simply to get along peacefully together is frustrated by misunderstanding and misinterpretation. Real communication and real understanding between people needs the sort of common currency, the common ground that sometimes language fails to provide. But if this week and this competition will show us one single thing, it is surely that we can all appreciate the beauty, the aesthetic, the elegance of gestures that are anything but clumsy, that craftsmanship is a language that we can all understand, all appreciate, and all value. For that reason, I believe that WorldSkills, even more than the competences it confers for individuals and the impression that makes on others locally, has a vital role to play in building alliances across the globe. Indeed, international events often forge, do they not, lasting connections, even when, perhaps especially when, their primary purpose is initially competition. I have no doubt that this week the young people of the world will astonish us with the standard of their skill and the range of their creativity. But for my part, I will only consider WorldSkills 2011 to be a real success if it helps to create long-term links across borders between young craftsmen and women and between their trainers and employers. Next year, the Olympic Games will come to London, as you know. I hope that some of you will return here to watch it in person, but even those of you who don't will certainly see it on the television. The history of sport has plenty to teach us about how the comradeship that pursuit of excellence in a common endeavour creates can overcome even the most extreme barriers. I would imagine all of you, certainly most of you, would have seen the photographs from the Berlin Olympics of 1936, the defeated German athlete Lutz Long embracing the gold medal winner Jesse Owens, much to the disapproval of his country's then leaders. Many of us will be aware of the political controversy that surrounded the two world heavyweight boxing matches between the black American Joe Louis and the white German Max Schmeling in the same period. But fewer may know that those two sportsmen, divided by so many things, subsequently became lifelong friends, and that almost 50 years on, Schmeling supported Louis financially through difficult times and even helped to pay for his funeral. One thinks, too, of two London heroes, Henry Cooper and his enduring relationship with boxing rival Muhammad Ali, and Bobby Moore and the friendship he formed with Pelé. Competition often generates such friendships, and if they can overcome barriers as daunting as those I've mentioned, how much greater is the scope of this competition here today to create strong ties, mutual respect, and shared understanding between nations and across cultures. Those sorts of ties have the potential to help us confront and overcome all kinds of shared international problems, all kinds of global challenges. For example, I think it's true to say that none of the 52 countries represented here has been entirely unaffected by the global economic crisis. Please be reassured at this point, I'm not going to embark on any kind of lecture on economics. Like the famous American economist J.K. Galbraith, I've always found that and I quote, economics is a subject profoundly conducive to cliché, resonant with boredom. Nevertheless, whatever our view of economics, most of us are much more aware of it than we were a year or so, certainly 3 years ago. And certainly, we can all see that no one has managed to overcome the effects of the world crisis alone. The markets to which all our countries must look for renewed prosperity are global. The skills and know-how of employees are portable. Increasingly, their employers look worldwide where they do business and certainly where they trade. Our skills system's strengths so often lie in their distinctiveness and appropriateness to the cultures in which they exist, but simultaneously, their continuing relevance to people's real-life needs in a world whose markets and labour markets are even more, ever more interlinked, is closely connected to how willing they are to learn from and adapt to influences from elsewhere. I'll give you perhaps the most striking example of that. I don't think there are any countries represented here in which apprenticeship training does not exist in one form or another. But of course, no two countries' apprenticeship programs are identical. They vary according to prevailing local industries, traditions, and according to national circumstances of how businesses, individuals, and the state relate to one another. Around the basic principles, that is entirely natural for the novice to learn from the master and to perfect their skill gradually by practicing in real life. Apprenticeships have come a long way since their origins in the ancient world. For Europeans, apprenticeships have been at the heart of two of our most significant periods of economic development. First, in the Middle Ages, with the development of the first continent-wide market for skills since the fall of the Roman Empire, and then again in the 19th century, with the widespread industrialization and the burgeoning demand for consumer products to which that led. We often think that modern life is much more complicated than the lives of our ancestors. And perhaps in some ways that's true. Yet today, apprenticeships continue to underpin economic success as they did in earlier times, not just in Europe, but around the globe. And irrespective of the fads and fashions of a particular age at a particular point in time, the principle that skills, competencies, understanding, and wisdom should be transmitted across the generation by mentors to learners underpins apprenticeships now as it always had. One difference, of course, is that apprenticeships are no longer confined to traditional crafts, although, as I've seen again today, traditional crafts still matter very much indeed. And they're certainly not confined to heavy manufacturing, are they? But it's important that we understand the value of those traditions while simultaneously recognizing that increasingly apprenticeships are playing a part in the high technology sectors, which are the commercial success of countries like Britain. Britain's chance to prosper in the future lies as a high-tech, high-skilled nation. And that means that part of our government's macroeconomic strategy is to invest in infrastructure. But infrastructure is not just about physical infrastructure, bridges, roads, so on. It's not even just about digital infrastructure. Perhaps even more, it's about the investment in human capital, recalibrating our workforce to make it fit to compete in that high-tech, high-skilled future. One of my priorities at the moment is to make it easier for businesses of all kinds to take on apprentices. I think there are two particular ways in which we can do that. First, employers must be able to have the confidence in the quality of the training that their apprentices receive. That means a progressive strengthening of the links between employers, colleges, and other training providers. It means ensuring that those training providers have sufficient flexibility to respond to dynamic economic need. As economies advance, skills needs become more advanced, as I've said. But simultaneously, those economies become more dynamic, and skills provision must match that dynamism. Each employer must be confident that they can gain the skills they need through the apprenticeship system. To achieve that, the second thing we must do is to cut the bureaucratic burdens that employing an apprentice places on firms whose staff have other things to do than fill in endless forms. That, of course, is particularly true in the current circumstances, where businesses will be looking very closely at their costs. That is why I was so pleased to announce recently that we'll be introducing a package of measures, many of them suggested by employers themselves, aimed at making it less burdensome for large businesses to take on apprentices. And we're currently developing a similar package of proposals for small and medium-sized businesses. But galvanizing employers to offer more apprenticeship places is not enough on its own. Even with unemployment among young people nearing the 1 million mark in this country, prospective learners, and especially the young, must be taught to believe that gaining an apprenticeship is a signal achievement in life, worthy of pride and worthy of celebration. We must, once again, I say once again because this was once a feature of the apprenticeship system, we must once again understand the aesthetic of practical learning matters too. We must celebrate practical learning in the way that we have for long recognized and celebrated academic achievement. If anyone doubts how people can gain a sense of pride and purpose, a sense of worth and value, a sense of achievement through practical accomplishment, all they have to do is come along to WorldSkills over the next few days and see that for themselves. Certainly, my own personal enthusiasm for practical skills and apprenticeships is not based on abstractions, but what I've seen with my own eyes, beginning, by the way, with my skilled worker father, who could do so much that I would love to be able to do, but sadly can't. My own background is academic. I was never clever enough to be practical. I've seen, too, what an apprenticeship can do for other individuals, especially, but not solely, young people. From the most disadvantaged backgrounds whose lives would have been much poorer without the chance to gain the skills they need to contribute and to succeed. Practical learning, apprenticeships feed social progress, social mobility, and so have a fundamentally important impact on social cohesion. These days, with the demand for higher level knowledge and skills increasing everywhere, nearly half of all young people in this country go to university. As a result, the other half are sometimes made to feel as if they might have failed, as if they've entered adulthood as kind of second class. But apprenticeships say very clearly to them there is another path to success, a parallel path. It must be as seductive, as navigable and progressive as the academic route which I took, and I imagine many of the people in this room took too. And it must be celebrated with just as much enthusiasm. I want those with practical skills who already begin the day with a spring in their step to know how they're valued by their contemporaries, and government can take a lead in that regard. You know, we know from survey evidence that those who acquire those kind of skills have laid the foundations for happy, productive lives. They've set an example for communities of just how much can be achieved through endeavour, enterprise, through hard work, through commitment and application. That is certainly the experience of this country, and the reason why, even while we're being obliged to reduce public expenditure in other important areas because of the after effects of the economic crisis, The government here will be funding the training of more apprenticeships by 2015 than any other time in our history. My ambition is that while I am the minister, to have more apprentices in Britain than we've ever had before. And we've begun. Since I became the minister, we've increased the number of apprenticeship starts by more than 100,000. We will continue to make apprenticeships the pivot of the skills system in this country. But in Britain, as elsewhere, the success of apprenticeships in giving pride and a sense of purpose to young people who might otherwise suffer unemployment, disillusion, and detachment from mainstream society is the result of a team effort. Credit must obviously go to families on whom apprentices rely for support and encouragement. It must go to the trainers in colleges and elsewhere on whom they must rely for their knowledge and skills. And it must go to the businesses, to the employers on whom they rely for the chance to put those skills into practice, to hone them and perfect them in real working circumstances. And a little of it, just a little, must go to the politicians on whom they must rely for the realization that while we may shape the world today, it is they that will shape it tomorrow. All of us owe it to our young people, wherever they are, to show by our actions that we know that they deserve a fair chance, the best chance to prosper, and that we're determined that they should get it. Because if we're not on their side, then who will be? Because if we fail to equip them what they need to improve on the world that they inherit from us, then who will? Because if we owe it to our children, our communities, our countries and our world to do everything we can to plant the seeds from which individual opportunity and communal prosperity grow. These are all reasons why I want to conclude by thanking you for coming to London this week, and most of all for all the work you do at home to promote the cause of skills. Those of us who believe in these things are a great family, an international family bound by our shared endeavour to promote practical learning, by our understanding of the importance of craft, by our passion for the future needs of our economies and our societies framed around the high-tech future that I have described. Now, we estimate that this week alone, considerably more than 150,000 people will come to see the results of your work. I'd love to be able to say 200,000, but I don't want to overestimate. Those people will go from this place touched by the Spirit, which I know fills this room and certainly fills those halls amongst the competitors and those that support them. Let us all therefore look with pride on the achievements of young people, whatever their specialisms, whatever country they represent, over the next few days. Changing lives by changing life chances, changing communities, changing nations through the kind of practical skills that we'll see during this WorldSkills, changing all of our futures. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. A huge advocate for training, and as I mentioned before, really celebrating that practical learning alongside academic achievement, as John has just described there. And we're now going to concentrate actually on a theme that we developed this morning when we had presentations from Crossrail and also the National Grid on investment in skills for engineering excellence. Our next speaker is Chris Boardman, and he joined British Aerospace in 1979 and completed his apprenticeship and a degree in business studies. Since then, he's held many roles within the company, including project director for the Tornado aircraft and managing director for the Typhoon aircraft. In June 2011, Chris was appointed MD of the Military Air and Information Unit of BAE Systems. And here to talk about investing in skills for our engineering excellence, please give a very warm welcome to Chris Boardman. Good afternoon, Chris.
Good afternoon.
Welcome along. Welcome.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'm actually here to talk about business success. And to have business success in my field, you have to be really good at engineering, if not excellent at engineering. And to be good at engineering, you need skilled people. And if you have skilled people, you need to have committed to train them. So that's the theme I want to take you through. And I'm absolutely delighted here to be representing my company, BAE Systems. For those who don't know BAE Systems, we are a defence, an aerospace and a security company. We are the biggest manufacturing and engineering company in the UK. And we provide defence and security equipment across land, sea and air. And this gives us a privileged position because from an engineering and manufacturing perspective, we get involved in very, very exciting things and very, very exciting projects. An example, the Eurofighter Typhoon. We have built and serviced this aircraft, which is operating not just with the Royal Air Force, but with the German, Italian and Spanish Air Forces, with the Austrian Air Force, and with the Royal Saudi Arabian Air Force. And we hope many more air forces in the future. We've designed and built 7 new Type 45 anti-aircraft destroyers for the Royal Navy. And next week we'll be laying the keel for the 5th submarine in the Astute class. Here's the largest block of the first 2 aircraft carriers being moved out of our shipbuilding hall before it being transferred by sea from Glasgow to Edinburgh. The aircraft carriers will be the largest ships ever built for the Royal Navy. The building of the aircraft carriers is the 2nd largest engineering project in the UK, and very topical, only second to the Olympics 2012 development project. We're also involved in providing armoured vehicles and munitions for armies across the world. And this slide here is a Terrier vehicle which was produced for the Royal Engineers. In recent years, BAE Systems has also built its capability not just in heavy engineering, but also in cyber and security services, an adjacency, a movement in skill need and engineering capability. To design and build these kind of sorts of engineering projects which are wide and varied requires the very best people, and the best engineering and manufacturing skills. And that's why I am personally delighted that BAE Systems can sponsor and has sponsored WorldSkills. And WorldSkills is an important event in the UK to demonstrate its commitment to high skills and to showcase the abilities our outstanding people, young people, have. And it gives me, again, great personal pleasure that 3 of our ex-apprentices, they're here, down in the hall, Rachel Carr, Kai Burkett and Sam Andrew, are representing the UK in the Manufacturing Team Challenge, a competition demonstrating the engineering skills that are crucial for the future of our business, but not just crucial for the future of our business, but also crucial for the future of the UK economy. It would be wrong for me to say this is not a challenging time for my company and the business that it is undertaking. No doubt many of you will have seen the difficult announcements in job losses that we had to announce last week. But actually, when it comes to skills and training, we are more committed than ever. We have committed to all the apprentices and graduates that we've taken on that they will remain with us, they will be trained, and hopefully that we can put them into very productive futures. The challenges only serve to reinforce this because we plan on having a long-term future. We know we have to adapt our skills and we are prepared to invest in our people. For these reasons, BAE Systems is committed to continue to invest in skills and indeed believes that our people are our greatest capability, something that the Minister has already echoed. You know, people, IT, engineering, computer simulations, fantastic. But if they can't be used and applied by very competent people, then of what value are they? From a BAE Systems point of view, we have here in the UK something called our Skills 2020 strategy, which focuses on education, and I stress education, that then leads into skills through training and on-the-job activity. In total, we have been investing up to £79 million in 2010 to drive this education-based training forward. We believe there is a very, very powerful business case for investing in skills. And BAE Systems is here at WorldSkills because we believe that industry, education and government must work together to celebrate and inspire, again, something that's been a word that was used by the Minister, inspire the next generation of young people to pursue careers in science, technology, engineering and maths. To ensure that enough young people are interested in careers in my own sector, which is the design, development and support of military aircraft and defence information systems, we have gone out to schools, primary schools and early secondary education streams in schools with roadshows. And we've done this with the Royal Air Force, and this year we will be going out to 300 schools and touching 30,000 young people, trying to get them to understand the importance of defence for nations and trying to inspire them to take careers in engineering. With respect to our early careers programme, despite the economic difficulties that we find ourselves in, we took on 268 apprentices this year, most of those being engineering-based apprentices, and 142 graduates. And my sister security business, an entity called Detica, a UK-based security business, took on a further 200 graduates. We're actually very, very proud that in the Ofsted inspection of our apprenticeship programmes in England last year, we received a Grade 1 outstanding result. Now, that's not just something to say. What it basically says to me is we are actually investing in people, and we're investing in the education and training that we provide to those people, and through that we will get, I have no doubt, great business success. So, by working together, we can make a bigger difference and deliver the skills of the engineering excellence that my company needs and the UK as an economy also needs to be successful in the future. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Before you go, Chris, got a question. Thank you very much, Chris. Before you go, Chris, I know you're going to be joining us on the panel discussion. Obviously, you mentioned about those job loss announcements, 3,000 that went. And that's the state of the times to a certain extent. You need to invest the long-term future. However, those people with those jobs who have been there from cradle to grave, some of them with amazing high-tech skills, are potentially left out on a limb. So just want to get a sense of what are you doing in order to make sure that those skills aren't lost somewhere in the system and that they're redeployed, making it as sensitively handled as possible?
Two things. For those that remain with us, so in my division that's still 12,000 very skilled people, we will do everything we can to compete across the world, and we are determined to have a long-term business going for many decades. For those that unfortunately have to leave our business and our sector, we're going to do everything we can to make that as smooth a transition as we possibly can. I was really, really pleased at to listen to the Chancellor of the Exchequer this week announced that there will be 2 enterprise zones, one in the northwest of England in Lancashire, predominantly around the facilities that I operate, and one over on the east coast in Hull. And again, I would like that to be established around the facilities that we have there. And as a company, we will do everything we can to help those local regions diversify their manufacturing and engineering basis, and we'll try and transition our people into new companies to help them grow.
Obviously, it is challenging times because of the cuts to defence budgets, public sector cuts as well. And we've got a sense, obviously, from John, who's a big champion of skills. But what more would you like this government in particular to do to make life easier? We've heard about the volume of apprentices going up, but it's not only about volume, it's about quality as well.
Yeah, well, I think it's a first of all, having ministers who speak like they do, and perhaps a little bit controversial in the UK. You know, we've had a system probably for over a decade that farms our young people into universities with no real idea of output. It's just the social thing to do. I think it's the first time I've heard a government to say practical learning, practical training, and I'm an ex-apprentice, so I can say things like that, is important to the economy. So I think giving leadership and telling people that that's important and setting those values, then it has to be backed up with investment. And I think the enterprise zones are a method of the government on behalf of the taxpayer investing. I still think large companies like mine then have a social and a moral obligation to help make that work. So I think it is, and the academic and education institutions in that mix as well. So I don't think it's just for the government. They've got to set the tone. They've got to provide some public investment, but we all have to respond and we all have to join into that.
And employer-led is something you adhere to?
Employer-led.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Well, Chris, I know you'll be joining the panel later on. In the meantime, Chris Boardman, everyone, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Well, our next speaker, Robert Schwartz, has been, since 1996, been the faculty member at Harvard Graduate School of Education, where he currently serves as the Francis Keppel Professor of Practice in Educational Policy and Administration. He's also served in the past as president of Achieve, which is a national non-profit established by governors and corporate leaders to help states strengthen academic performance. And here with the presentation outlining the report I referred to earlier, which is the Pathway to Prosperity report, and what action plans the US in particular now need to adopt, despite them being a leading industrial nation. But we know the US face a variety of political challenges as well as economic as well. Please give a very warm welcome to Professor Robert Schwartz. Good afternoon to you, and very welcome.
Well, thanks very much. Good afternoon. It's a real pleasure to be here. I can't help but think, having heard the last two speakers talking about the rising commitment here to build and really renew a long apprenticeship tradition that in this country, I can't help but feel some jealousy, because we don't, at least in the US, hear either political leaders or corporate leaders really making the strong case for investment in skills, and in particular, investment in building apprenticeship programs to help young people make the transition from high school, secondary school, into the labor market. President Clinton used to say that the U.S. was the only industrialized country that had no formal system for helping young people make that transition. I'm not sure that that is exactly right, but as you'll hear from my comments, we really do have a huge imbalance, at least in my view. I'm going to talk a bit about this Pathways report. I'm not going to try to summarize it, but just to give you some sense of what the main lines of the argument in the report are, and then say a few things about how the report has been received and what our strategy is for taking some of those ideas and moving them forward. So in February 2011, along with two colleagues, an economist, Ron Ferguson, best known in the US for his work on the racial achievement gap, and a journalist named Bill Simons, who spent most of his career covering education for Business Week, we released this report entitled Pathways to Prosperity. We released it at an event in Washington, D.C. with the U.S. Education Secretary, Arne Duncan, and a panel of three leaders from the corporate sector, our community college sector, and a large city school superintendent. When the three of us first began meeting to discuss the study that led to this report, we were mindful of the fact that 20 years earlier, a commission established by a foundation in the U.S., the W.T. Grant Commission, had issued a very powerful report called The Forgotten Half, Non-College Bound Youth in America. As the title suggests, this 1988 report argued that public resources and support were disproportionately focused on young people headed for higher education, and that without a much more robust investment in preparing non-college bound youth for successful transitions into the workforce, these young people would be at significant social and economic risk. So the jumping off question for our study was, is there still a forgotten half today in the US? And if so, how do we make more progress in serving that population in the next 20 years than we've made in the last 20? On the face of it, it seemed unlikely that we would find a persisting forgotten half of young people in 2011. For one thing, the term non-college bound has essentially disappeared from our vocabulary, at least in the US. Over the last 20 years, there's been growing public agreement that all young people need to be prepared for further education as well as for careers. When we ask high school students today in the US what they're going to do after high school, over 90% say that they're going on to some form of college or university. More important, over 70% of high school graduates do in fact go on to enroll in a higher education institution after leaving high school. But when we ask what proportion of young Americans have earned a college or university degree by their mid-20s, the answer is less encouraging. Only 30% have graduated from a 4-year college or university, and another 10% from a 2-year college. If we add in another 10% who've acquired some form of a recognized 1-year occupational certificate from a post-secondary education or training institution, this brings us up to half the population with a meaningful post-secondary credential by 25. It may be an exaggeration to characterize the other half of the age cohort as forgotten, but in an economy in which the gap between those with post-secondary credentials and skills and those without is widening, the 1 in 4 young people who drop out of high school are especially vulnerable, but so are those who start some form of higher education but never finish. Our conclusion, looking at our high school and higher education dropout data, was that, if anything, the case for investing in developing a set of rigorous career and technical education pathways alongside the strictly academic pathway is even stronger today than it was 20 years earlier. This conclusion was buttressed by 2 sources of data. First, job projections from the Georgetown University Center on Education and the Workforce suggest that over the next decade, nearly a third of jobs, new jobs and replacement jobs, will be so-called middle-skill jobs, jobs requiring some education or training beyond high school, but not necessarily a 4-year degree. This projection challenges the widespread belief that our labor market is becoming increasingly bifurcated into high skills and low skills occupations, and that the only good jobs in our economy will require at least a 4-year college degree. The second source of data that we found compelling comes from 2 recent OECD studies, Learning for Jobs and Jobs for Youth. These 2 studies, the first from the Education Directorate, the second from the Labor and Social Affairs Director at OECD, provide strong evidence that those European countries with the best developed vocational education systems, especially the countries with the strongest apprenticeship systems, manage to equip a much larger fraction of their young people with skills and credentials to make a successful transition from secondary school into the workforce, thereby significantly reducing the proportion of young people at risk of sustained unemployment at the very point of entry into the labor market. When I talk with American colleagues about the virtues of the Swiss or German apprenticeship systems, when I explain how these are mainstream systems serving a broad range of students, preparing people for white-collar careers in high-tech or banking, as well as the traditional blue-collar trades, the first response I get often is, but don't they track students as early as age 10, something that we would never condone. Leaving aside for the moment the pervasive but subtle forms of tracking that characterize much of American education, the answer to that question, at least for Germany, is unfortunately yes, they do track very early, too early in my view. Given the history of vocational education in the US, especially the perception that in large urban districts, vocational education has too often been a dumping ground for low-income and minority youth, this often or usually is a conversation stopper. To understand this reaction, one needs to understand 2 things about the American system. One having to do with the 20th century growth and decline of vocational education. The other with the evolution of the academic standards movement over the past 2 decades. The historical point is that the US vocational system, largely with the stimulus of a major piece of federal legislation back in 1917, has developed mostly as a separate system, organized and governed at the state level independent of academic high schools. It was really not until the 1960s that there was any federal support for vocational education programs offered inside regular comprehensive high schools. Consequently, while vocational education mostly has taken place inside comprehensive high schools for the last half century, Its programs have been offered on a separate track from programs serving university-bound students. American high schools continue to function largely as a kind of sorting and selecting machine, identifying those students deemed to have the talent for higher learning and providing them with a rigorous academic education while expecting everyone else to enter the labor market directly upon graduation. Despite our rhetoric about the democratic purposes of comprehensive high schools, by and large, these institutions, at least in the US, have been organized in ways that perpetuated existing racial and economic stratification, with low-income and minority students disproportionately concentrated in the lower status vocational track. With the rise of the standards movement in the last 20 years or so, the name of the game in the US has really changed, driven largely by the dramatic changes taking place in the economy, the decline of manufacturing, the computing revolution, globalization, and the outsourcing of lower-skilled jobs. Schools were now being asked to provide all students with a foundational level of academic skills that hitherto were expected only from the talented few. With rising academic expectations came rising accountability for results, which meant increased pressure on schools to devote more time to core academics, especially those subjects being assessed for accountability purposes, and less time for elective subjects, including vocational education. From the mid-'80s to the mid-'90s, we saw the percentage of American high school students taking 3 or more courses in a single vocational area drop from 34% to 25%. That percentage has continued to decline, especially in those states that have made the college preparatory curriculum the default curriculum for all students. While the rhetoric that we hear in today's policy environment in the US is that all students will leave high school, college, and career ready, the reality is that almost everywhere, career readiness is on the back burner. Almost the entire focus is on the academic side. Despite this fact, in the last 2 decades, new models of vocational education have emerged in the US that demonstrate that it is possible to combine rigorous academics with career training in high-skill, high-demand fields. In order to differentiate these kinds of programs from vocational education in the more traditional trades, the term career and technical education, or CTE as we call it, has come into use. These models are best seen in a set of national programs that have acquired sufficient scale to become important players in the high school reform world. Our Pathways report profiles several such programs. Perhaps the best-known model in the US combining strong academics with career preparation is the Career Academy, and I know there are also there's a Career Academy movement here in the UK as well. Career Academy programs typically enroll young people as early as grade 9 or age 14 and carry them through high school graduation 4 years later. There are roughly 3,000 Career Academies in the US, 500 of which operate under the umbrella of the National Academy Foundation. These so-called NAF academies prepare young people in 4 career areas: finance, engineering, information technology, and hospitality and tourism, and they are about to launch 17 academies in the healthcare field. A key feature of the NAF design is that all students are provided with a 6 to 10 week paid internship by one of 2,500 corporate partners. A second model, a bit different in its orientation and focus, is called High Schools That Work. It's another national network of over 1,200 schools, mostly in the South, where many high schools continue to have a strong vocational track. Unlike career academies, which are deliberately designed as a kind of detracking strategy, the focus of High Schools That Work has been to ensure that students in a vocational track are getting rigorous academics, especially in mathematics and science, albeit typically taught in a more applied fashion. In addition to these and other national networks, many states have revamped their old vocational programs or created new ones that combine instruction in more modern, challenging career areas with rigorous academics. One very positive consequence of the standards movement has been that it has created pressure on school districts to close down low-level, low-expectations math and science courses that vocational students were often assigned to. In a world in which all students are required to pass assessments in maths and English on challenging academic standards as a condition of high school graduation, there's no longer room for such courses. One important common denominator that characterizes our strongest national and state CTE programs is that they are designed to leave open the option for successful graduates to continue on to some form of higher education. And this is, in fact, what most graduates do. Over 90% of the National Academies graduates, for example, go on to higher education, most to 4-year colleges, and of these, more than half graduate in 4 years. Our national 6-year graduation rate, by the way, from 4-year institutions is only 56%. A related common denominator is that these programs typically are designed to serve a broad range of students. While African American and Latino students are often overrepresented in these programs, as are students with special needs, these programs are not intended primarily for at-risk students or students with very low academic skills. The involvement of employers in program design and the provision of internships or other forms of work-based learning creates a set of behavioral expectations around attendance, punctuality, respectful communication, teamwork, and other soft skills that typically carry over into the classroom setting, creating a seriousness of purpose, often missing from other high school classrooms serving similar students. The challenge for the U.S. is not simply to scale up quality CTE programs like those I've just described, but rather to create a pathways system within which these and other effective program models can grow and flourish. This is why the experience of the European apprenticeship countries is so relevant for countries like the US and I'd argue the UK as well. In Austria, Denmark, Finland, Germany, the Netherlands, and Switzerland, one can see coherent vocational systems designed to help most young people make a successful transition from secondary school to work. Although the design of these systems differs from country to country, there are some common elements. These systems all serve a broad range of students, from between 40 and 70% of the age cohort. They all offer pathways leading to qualifications in a broad range of occupations, not just the typical blue-collar trades that we often associate with apprenticeships. They all combine learning at the workplace with aligned academic coursework in a classroom setting. They all have substantial employer involvement in curriculum design and standard setting in order to ensure that the qualifications graduates earn will have currency in the labor market. And all of these systems acknowledge the need to create options for graduates to continue on to further education if they so choose. Now, it's easy for American policymakers to tick off the reasons why such systems can't or shouldn't be built in the U.S. They say these systems depend on early tracking, they expect students to make binding career choices at too early an age, they require a degree of centralized planning that we would never tolerate, they're built on trade and crafts traditions that we don't share, their employers have strong incentives to participate, in part because their labor markets are more regulated than ours. Our unions would never agree to youth sub-minimum wages. The list of excuses or arguments goes on. While all of these concerns have some basis in reality in one or more of these systems, they are by no means universally the case. For example, Finland and Denmark demonstrate that one can have high-quality upper secondary vocational system without early tracking. While Germany and Switzerland ask students to choose from a bewilderingly large list of occupations, Denmark asks students to choose initially from 12 occupational clusters, and only later do students zero in on a more specific occupation. While it is true that the German labor market is highly regulated, the Swiss labor market operates much like our own, and Switzerland's apprenticeship system is, if anything, even more impressive than Germany's. Switzerland also, I believe, has the lowest youth unemployment rate in Europe, and I don't believe that any of these systems treats the apprenticeship contract as irrevocable. In fact, even in Germany, about 20% of apprentices switch occupations after the first year. I'm now going to deviate a bit from our report. What I've just been saying constitutes a chunk of the report, and I'm going to speculate a bit about what a U.S. pathway system would look like. For reasons I'll explain later, we kind of shied away from making explicit, detailed recommendations in the report, and as I say, I'll come back to that in a minute. So what would a U.S. pathway system look like that avoided the pitfalls of tracking and that drew on the very best features of the strongest European systems? Given our history and culture, is it feasible to imagine that the U.S. could ever build a vocational education system that has at least some of the attributes of the strongest European systems? I believe the answer is yes, but it would require an approach built upon the following principles. First, that all students would be provided the same Common Core academic curriculum, at least up through grade 10 or age 16. Second, it would require a much expanded investment in career information, counseling, and workplace exposure, beginning in the middle grades and continuing on through secondary school. Third, it would require that all career pathways would need to be aligned with regional labor market needs, would require significant employer engagement and lead to a post-secondary credential with real currency in the labor market. Fourth, all pathways would need to provide continuing academic skill development, especially analytic reading, writing, communication, quantitative reasoning, integrated with the career and technical education. Fifth, enrollment in a pathway would need to be based primarily on student and family choice, not on assignment by the school. And finally, that all pathways would need to leave open the possibility of further education beyond the attainment of an initial occupational certificate or degree. These principles can best be seen in operation in Northern European countries like Finland and Denmark. While these countries do not have as well-developed apprenticeship systems as the German-speaking nations, they do have the advantage of meeting the first and fifth of the principles that I just mentioned, relying on student choice, having a common core curriculum up through the end of lower secondary education. These would be critically important if this approach to secondary education would ever take root in the US. Finland is especially impressive in this regard. Finland has no tracking whatever up through grade 9, at which point students choose between academic and vocational upper secondary schools. The fact that over 40% of young Finns now opt for vocational education in a technology-driven economy suggests that it is possible to design a vocational system that can compete on a level playing field for status and resources with the university-bound system. I won't detail some of the barriers that would have to be overcome in the US to move in this direction, except to mention one. I mean, at bottom, a major cultural difference between US employers and those European employers that participate in apprenticeship programs is that most US employers are deeply skeptical that 16 or 17-year-olds can add value to their firm's bottom line. This may be a chicken and egg phenomenon. Schools don't ask employers to provide anything like European-style apprenticeship opportunities because they assume that employers will refuse. Employers don't offer them because they doubt that high schools could organize themselves to support such opportunities by providing the rigorous aligned academic work that could help students perform successfully at the workplace. Let me double back to the reason why we did not provide anything like this set of principles or kind of a roadmap. When we wrote this report, our principal goal was really to kind of get the country to focus on the consequence of going down this path increasingly with only a single pathway, an academic pathway, to get young people through high school and on into adulthood, really, not just into the workforce, but on into adult life. We decided we really wanted to cast a searchlight directly on the problem. Very often in the US, at least, our reports typically end with a kind of detailed laundry list of here's what the federal government should do, here's what states should do, here's what employers should do. But we really decided we wanted to kind of provoke a public conversation and get people really asking and thinking, do we need to now rethink the strategy that we've been on? Do we need to build some alternative pathways? So consequently, we limited our recommendations really to 3 broad themes. The first of which was simply an argument for creating more pathways beyond the single academic one. The second was the need to really figure out a way to get employers much, much more engaged much earlier in the development of young people and in the building of a system, a shared system with employers and educators together. And the third was to really push back a bit and argue for a kind of youth development focus and the creation of a kind of pretty public compact, if you will, between adult society and young people to send the message to young people that we really need all of them to get the kind of skills and credentials that will be required in this increasingly challenging economy. Our report has triggered an interesting set of reactions. While there have been some folks who have worried that we are calling for something that would be a kind of a step backward in terms of moving back toward a tracking system, and we've tried to argue that pathways and tracks need not be the same thing, again, given the principles that I've outlined, I think there are ways to avoid the sort of old tracking system. But by and large, the report has really triggered an enormous amount of interest out in the field. One member of our team, the former journalist Bill Simons, who's the person who's kind of on the payroll on this project, has been virtually nonstop since February out on the road responding to requests and invitations from state and national organizations, in some cases local organizations, to come talk about the report, lay out the argument. Several states have convened statewide summits bringing together corporate leaders, political leaders, and educators to kind of address the themes of the report. And I think it's interesting that for a variety of reasons, the time seems to be really right for people to want to sit back and ask whether or not the single academic pathway in the US continues to make sense. In this economy, there's kind of rising middle-class anxiety about the costs of four-year colleges. If you read the UK press just in the last day or two, you can obviously see there's a lot of anxiety here as well, as the government is about to raise the costs of college. 3 different news stories or reports since our report came out have continued to fuel this anxiety. We had a front-page story in the New York Times on a report following graduates of four-year institutions, a class of 2010, indicating that over 40% are either unemployed or more typically working in jobs that really didn't require a four-year college degree. A second report from the state of Florida telling us that young people with a 2-year degree in applied technical fields are out-earning 4-year degree holders by about $10,000 a year. And in some ways, the most devastating report was a report done by 2 sociologists, a book called Academically Adrift, following 2,400 young people in four-year institutions, a cross-section of young people, cross-section of institutions, in which the question was, what's the evidence that students are actually in four-year institutions are acquiring the kind of core analytic, reasoning, problem-solving, writing skills that we typically think should be at the core of higher education. They sampled students at the beginning of freshman year and then at the end of their sophomore year and then at the end of their senior year. The bottom line was 45% of students showed no discernible improvement in those core academic skills between in the first 2 years and even over 4 years, 36% showed no discernible improvement. And the researchers argued, obviously, this is one of those problems. You can say it's weakness in preparation in the secondary schools. You can say it's the failure on the part of the higher education institutions to really make challenging assignments, focus on student learning, et cetera. But for me, at least, the core message is suggested in the title of the book is that we have an awful lot of students who are just kind of drifting into four-year institutions because we have no other socially legitimate, respectable alternatives for them, particularly if you're from a middle-class family. And as we've moved around and talked with people about the report, we're hearing a lot of questioning on the part of parents about the payoff from four-year institutions. We've all been, at least in the US, sold on the proposition that the more education you get, the better off you'll be. And at some macro level, that's obviously true. But increasingly in this economy, it isn't simply how much education you have, but what kind of education, what the skills are that you're acquiring, and how they match up with the changing requirements of the workforce. Finally, the question is kind of, okay, what's the next step? What are we now planning to do now that we've actually, I think, made a start, at least, in raising public consciousness about some of these issues? In the US, change happens mostly at the state and local level, which is education is principally a state and local function. And if you follow politics in Washington these days, you know it's extremely difficult to have a civil conversation or get any momentum around any new social program. So we, in combination with a leading education and workforce development organization in the US called Jobs for the Future, have started a process where we are now starting to because of all the interest in the states, we're going to pick 3 to 5 states where corporate leadership, political leadership, and education leadership seem committed to the core ideas outlined in the report and want to work together to try to fashion, move from a collection of programs to the creation of a real system. And we hope over the next year to kind of start work in 3 to 5 states and in the largest regional labor markets in those states to see if we can build the kind of system that we've been advocating. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for going through that report. I've got a couple of questions. Obviously, you'll be joining the panel discussion later. In particular, during the panel, I'd like to pick up on some of those differences between the countries, which I know that you've analysed throughout the report. You've talked about the next steps and trialling this in 3 to 5 different states. And you mentioned very briefly about parents. There's been a mixed reaction from parents. Will they accept that 4-year college? Now, when you read something like the Pathways Prosperity Report, which I've got here, I like reading these kind of reports, but most parents won't want to read something as detailed as that. So is there a piece around appealing to the parents and providing them with information held within that report, but in a way that's appealing to them? Is that something you've thought of as well?
That's a really good point. We don't really have at this point anything that quite fits the bill, but it's one reason we've been out on the road so much talking and particularly participating in radio talk shows and other kinds of forums. I will say for people who might shudder a bit at the idea of a report coming from a university. It's not an accident that we hired a journalist to do the writing. And I think even though the report is kind of dense with data, at least I like to think that it is written in a way that's readable and can provoke people to action.
It is very readable and it will provoke people to reaction, but it is obviously a lengthy report.
Yes.
But one of the things I picked up on, which was quite a concern, obviously the African Americans and the Latinos, they're failing a whole generation in America at the moment, and you get a load of frustrated people, men in particular, women this is an issue for as well, but those frustrated men getting into that system, all the social problems that's going to cause in the short to medium term. We've seen a little bit of it here in London recently. Yes. So there's some urgent action based around that. Do politicians get that?
I'm not sure what the answer to that is. To me, one of the things, though, that we've learned about at least social programs in the U.S., the ones that are most effective are ones that are more universal in their strategy, but then within that sort of universal approach also have a strong kind of targeting or equity function. And I think the potential here is to build a political coalition of frustrated middle-class families who are concerned about the costs of college and looking for an alternative, along with the Latino and African-American parents who at the end of the day, what do they care about? They want their kids to have skills so they can make it in the workforce. And I think, as I say, there is the potential for really building a coalition that cuts across racial and class lines to really address this issue.
It's a fantastic report. I do urge you to read it, and thank you very much for actually putting it together. I know it can't have been easy because it goes into great detail, particularly when you go around all the different other countries around the world to look at best practice. Yes. And I appreciate it. Looking forward to seeing you on the panel. Robert Schwartz, everybody, thank you very much.
No, thank you.
Well, we're now going to move not too far away from the United States of America to Brazil, and part of the BRICS country. You must have been sleeping under a brick to not realise the scale of what Brazil has achieved, obviously with the natural resources helping them a little bit with their GDP growth over the last few years. But it's a well-advanced, rapidly developing country, and it is quite astounding how the GDP rates have grown over the last few years. So I'm delighted to say we're now going to focus on Brazil. And we have as our next presenter, Rafael Lucchesi, who is the Director General of SENAI. He's also the Director of Education and Technology of the Brazilian National Confederation of Industry. But as Director General of SENAI, who he's representing here today, that really does look at the National Industrial Training Service throughout the country. And as his Director General, he was also appointed as the delegate of Brazil to the WorldSkills International, and that explains his attendance here today at the WorldSkills competition and also the forum. And Mr. Lucchesi is also a member of the Board of Trustees for WorldSkills Foundation and President of WorldSkills America. And here to have a look at what SENAI has actually developed and what it has accomplished, please give a very warm welcome, not one, but two people, because he has an interpreter on standby, just in case, but give a very warm welcome to Rafael Lucchesi. And I should say he's going to be joined by Frederick Soros as well, who's also from SENAI. So welcome to you both, gentlemen. Thank you very much for coming.
Boa tarde, eu gostaria de inicialmente passar filme.
We're going to present briefly a short video about Brazil.
This is the Brazil you already know. The time has come for you to know this other Brazil. We are the 7th economy in the world, leader in Latin America, the 5th best country to invest in, the 3rd largest agricultural exporter, the 10th largest industrial producer, the 2nd largest iron ore producer. We have the 7th largest chemical industry in the planet. We manufacture from footwear to vehicles. We are trendsetters. We innovate. We give wings to those who want to fly next to us. And we surprise the world with our energy. We are creative, modern, bold, the 8th consumer market. With infrastructure, skilled labor force, and more than 8 million square kilometers of good opportunities. Behind those numbers is CNI. The National Confederation of Industry represents 27 states federations, more than 1,300 employer unions, and 420,000 enterprises. And it contributes to the Brazilian industry's increasing modernization, diversification, and integration into the global economy. This more competitive Brazil is also made with skilled labor. CNI is one of the largest systems of professional education in the world, which serves the industry demand in Brazil with over 800 schools. Through partnerships, the institution exports its Brazilian technology and methodology to the world. Throughout the country, SESI helps thousands of companies to promote a healthier industry. The worker discovers a new world, multiplies knowledge, gets more safety and health at work, free pass in sports, in culture, and there are plenty of reasons to smile. With an eye to the future and to business management, EL, Evaldo Lodi Institute, trains entrepreneurs and executives. That's it with education, culture, innovation, and health. That CNI helps to transform Brazil.
Bom, para além da propaganda que nós poderíamos apresentar, o Brasil tem muitos desafios.
Besides the propaganda that we just shown, Brazil has a lot of challenges for the future.
Estamos numa posição intermediária entre economias baseadas em fatores de produção e economias focadas na inovação.
We are in the middle position between a country that is based on factors of production and a country that is based on innovation.
Temos uma configuração baseada no estado do bem-estar social e na democracia, sem termos atingido ainda plenamente uma economia industrial a caminho do desenvolvimento sustentável, uma economia de alto investimento.
We are a country that is much focused on social welfare, but at the same time has a lot of challenge, and we need to go to this path of innovation as soon as we can.
Economia de alto investimento.
And high investment also.
Se nós compararmos nos países que compõem o BRICS e pegarmos os principais fatores de competitividade identificados pelo World Economic Forum, o Brasil situa-se bem.
If we compare ourselves with the BRICS nations in relation to the World Economic Forum Competitiveness Index, we are quite well.
Se nós pegarmos apenas a sofisticação empresarial, o Brasil é o primeiro país dos BRICS.
If we only analyze entrepreneurship sophistication, we are the first one among the BRICS.
A resultante final, o Brasil ocupa a 53ª posição e é em grande medida a função da agenda pública baseada nas nossas deficiências de infraestrutura, segurança jurídica e dimensão macroeconômica.
But on average, our global position in the World Economic Forum is the number 53, thanks to a high presence of the state that we have a lot of problems in terms of macroeconomic, justice problems, and macroeconomic environment and other problems.
Entretanto, quando nós analisamos a nossa posição competitiva com os países de economia industrial avançada, vamos ver que temos um longo caminho a perseguir.
But when we analyze and compare ourselves with developed countries, we have a long way to follow and to catch.
À exceção do tamanho de mercado e a dimensão financeira, nós temos diversas agendas a cumprir e agendas simultâneas.
Besides the size of the market and also the financial sector that in Brazil is pretty highly developed, we have a big agenda to follow.
Temos uma dupla agenda, uma agenda velha que os países industriais já trilharam e uma agenda nova na promoção da inovação.
We have two agendas. One, an old one, which developed country has already followed, which is the path of education, and another agenda, which is the agenda of innovation.
Na área de educação profissional, nós identificamos que o Brasil ocupa a 58ª posição. Nós estamos situados no âmbito dos BRICS, posição muito semelhante à Rússia, China e Índia.
When we compare ourselves in terms of the training index, we have a similar position in comparison to BRICS like India and China.
Se nós identificarmos os valores per capita por grupos de 100 mil habitantes, vamos identificar que temos ainda uma longa jornada a cumprir.
But when we compare ourselves in terms of per capita enrollments, we have a long way to follow, especially in relation to developed countries.
Nós temos deficiência na nossa matriz educacional. De cada 6 estudantes universitários, nós temos apenas um estudante em educação profissional.
At every 6 students that we have studying, only one is going to vocational training in Brazil, so it's a big problem.
E de cada 100 graduados no Brasil, apenas 5 são engenheiros.
And from every 100 bachelor degrees that we have in Brazil, only 5 are engineers.
No índice de inovação, nossa posição também é a 42ª, uma posição intermediária que acompanha os grupos dos países membros do BRICS.
In terms of innovation, we also hold an intermediate position along with the BRICS.
Deixando de falar um pouco do país, falando do Senai, nós começamos com a missão da instituição focada na educação profissional, da transferência tecnológica, na promoção da inovação, contribuindo para a competitividade da indústria brasileira.
If we now talk, besides talking about the nation, talk about Senai, Senai's mission is to promote technical and vocational training and to promote innovation, the transfer of industrial technologies as to bring industrial competitiveness to the Brazilian industrial sector.
Fundado em 1942, ele suporta o desenvolvimento industrial e a melhoria da qualidade da formação da mão de obra para o desenvolvimento industrial brasileiro.
It was founded in 1942 to help the import substitution process and also to bring quality in terms of skills to Brazil's growing industrial development.
Não seria possível a revolução industrial que o Brasil alcançou no século XX sem o Senai.
We believe that Brazil's industrial revolution that took place in the 20th century wouldn't exist if Senai didn't took part.
O Brasil possui hoje uma indústria moderna e competitiva, apesar de ter um sistema educacional de terceiro mundo.
Even though we have an underdeveloped educational status, we understand that we have a pretty competitive and innovative industrial sector in Brazil.
Em grande medida, isso é possível porque nós temos um sistema educacional baseado, inspirado nas séries metódicas suíça, germânica.
This is thankfully due to our methodologies based on the Swiss and the German models back in the 40s.
Gerido pelo setor industrial.
It is maintained and managed by the industrial sector.
A despeito de termos um sistema educacional fortemente academicista.
Even though we have a very academicist educational system in Brazil.
Temos 800 unidades operacionais, o Senai.
These are some numbers, almost 800
200
centers,
laboratórios,
200 labs,
20 mil empregados,
more than 20,000 employees.
28 áreas de atuação.
We work in 28 areas of expertise.
E 2,3 milhões de alunos.
And we do offer 2.3 million enrollments every year.
Desempenhamos por ano mais de 120 mil serviços de consultoria tecnológica.
We offer more than 120,000 technological services to industrial companies in Brazil.
E 48 parcerias internacionais em mais de 29 países.
And we have more than 48 international partnerships in more than 29 countries.
Somos membros da WorldSkills Internacional desde 1981.
We are a member of the WorldSkills since 1981.
E temos um orçamento de 1 bilhão de libras.
We have a budget of around 1 billion pounds.
E do sistema indústria, que compõe outras atividades correlatas, de 3 bilhões de libras.
And if we add up the other institutions that makes the Brazilian Industry Confederation, this budget totals 3 billion pounds every year.
O Brasil tem aproximadamente a dimensão da Europa.
We have basically the dimension of Europe.
E nós atuamos em metade do território.
And we have our operations in basically half of the territories in Brazil, the states in Brazil.
Assegurando apoio para as atividades industriais.
Hoping to support the industrial activity in Brazil.
Mas se o Senai foi importante na história da indústria do Brasil,
if Senai was important for the industrial history,
ele quer continuar sendo elemento-chave para os desafios do futuro da competitividade do país.
We want to continue to be a strategic player in Brazil's future.
Enxergando isso por intermédio de fatores de competitividade que estão no diamante competitivo.
And what we are looking is in this sort of a triangular that has the competitiveness factors.
Nós vamos identificar tarefas importantes na área de educação profissional.
We're going to identify challenges in vocational training,
prontidão tecnológica,
technological readiness,
e capacidade inovativa.
And innovation capacity.
Esses três aspectos estão sublinhados na missão da organização anteriormente aludida.
These three pillars are basically listed on our mission.
E os desafios para o futuro são dobrar o número de matrículas.
And the challenges for the future for Senai is, first of all, to double the number of enrollments.
Ajudando o país a ajustar a sua matriz educacional.
In order to help Brazil to adjust its educational status, matrix and demand that we are having.
Ampliando a nossa rede de suporte laboratorial para apoiar as necessidades tecnológicas da indústria.
Expanding our lab infrastructure to support the growing industrial sector in Brazil.
E ampliando enormemente as competências de centros tecnológicos transversais e setoriais para apoiar a capacidade inovativa das firmas.
And also creating high-performance technological centers focused on transversal areas in order to work and to support new needs of the industrial sectors in Brazil, especially in applied research. Transversal and sectorial.
Em soluções de problemas complexos, engenharia avançada, pesquisa aplicada.
In areas of complex solutions, applied research, re-engineering.
Pesquisa aplicada.
Applied research.
Ok. E outsourcing de P&D.
And outsourcing of research.
Estamos estruturando um novo modelo de atuação em cooperação com o Instituto Fraunhofer.
We are looking forward to establish this new structure of centers pretty much based on the German model, which focus on the Fraunhofer Institute of Applied Knowledge and Research.
Em cooperação com o Ministério da Ciência, Tecnologia e Inovação do Brasil.
And also in cooperation with the Ministry of Science and Technology of Brazil.
O que vai dar uma dimensão diferenciada na nossa forma de atuação.
And the idea is that we want to have a differentiated way of working in the future.
Ampliando a nossa capacidade cooperativa.
Trying to expand our cooperative activity.
Sendo um catalisador das competências geradas nas atividades acadêmicas no Brasil e internacionalmente.
Trying to aggregate the academic needs and know-hows in terms of technologies and trying to push this to the industrial sector in Brazil.
E funcionalizando isso melhor para a competitividade da indústria brasileira.
And thus contributing to the industrial competitiveness of Brazil.
Ok, obrigado.
Thank you.
Lovely. So here, Raphael, what Raphael is not admitting is that he can speak some English. In fact, when he's had a couple of drinks, his English is perfect.
Yeah, sure.
True. I've just got a quick question for you. If you'd just like to come back here to the lectern, I know you'll be joining us for the panel discussion to represent Senai. Obviously, I get it that Senai are passionate about vocational education and training, and you've done a huge amount for Brazil. Brazil's obviously really benefited from globalization with your natural resources. It's been of a great benefit to trade with the rest of the world. But I'm just wondering, when you talked about 5 out of every 100 graduates at the moment are engineers, I'm not sure if I missed this, but what figure are you looking to achieve, say, in the next 5 to 10 years? What do you need in order to truly compete on the world stage?
Dizendo dos 5, no dado de 5 engenheiros a cada 100 pessoas, 100 graduados, qual que é o nosso grande desafio no longo prazo?
Bom, o sistema educacional brasileiro
The educational system in Brazil
tem claramente colocado a necessidade de ampliação da capacidade de formação de engenheiros.
has put this challenge to increase the number of engineers at present.
Subsidiariamente, temos uma necessidade de ampliação da educação profissional.
And also, in addition, we have a need to expand vocational training in Brazil.
O país tem hoje 9 milhões de estudantes de nível médio
We have around 9 million students attending high school,
e apenas 1 milhão em educação profissional.
but just 1 million attending vocational training.
Nossa meta é que pelo menos metade desses alunos sejam de educação profissional.
Our challenge, this is for Senai, at least half of this 9 million goes to vocational training 4 years.
So that's a big challenge.
It is.
And I just get that sense with Brazil, actually, that even though obviously you're doing some great work there, you could maybe borrow a little bit from the US, dare may I say, through that thought leadership. So would you say that I'm right in those chief executives, the Bill Gates of the world, that's what's lacking in Brazil as well, to give that real thought leadership?
Está falando exatamente que será que a gente não deveria também olhar o lado americano do ponto de vista de inovação, pessoas como Bill Gates, está buscando isso?
The answer is yes, by the way.
Falando, a resposta é sim.
Ok. A capacidade inovativa brasileira tem sido um grande talento pela enorme criatividade da sociedade brasileira.
We believe that Brazil has a very a highly innovative background and culture.
O World Economic Forum traduz isso em sermos o país com maior sofisticação empresarial entre os países emergentes.
The World Economic Forum indicates that as being the most innovative countries among the BRICS and among emergent economies.
Precisamos mais de uma agenda pública mais friendly ao desenvolvimento industrial e competitivo.
What we need is a more public-friendly policy to promote innovation and industrial development.
I'll let you get away with that answer. I'll accept that as your answer. I want to say thank you very much to Raphael Lucchesi and also Frederic Soares. Please show your appreciation. Thank you, guys. Okay, we're now going to have 3 presentations looking at the perspective of the global industry partners who, without WorldSkills International, wouldn't be what it is today. So we salute you and thank you for your support of this event. We're first of all going to have a look at Cisco Systems, and I'm delighted to say that we have Michael Stevenson, who's the Vice President of Global Education from Cisco Systems here present. And we're going to look at the response from the industry on skills development, really about industry's demand for skilled workers and changes to the workforce as well. Now, Michael is responsible for developing Cisco's education strategy and leading implementation in countries all around the world. So please give a very warm welcome to Michael Stevenson. Good afternoon, Michael. Hello. Nice to meet you. There was a few people stood up then. I didn't know which one it was going to be, but good to meet you. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I began my day over at our corporate headquarters here in the UK near Heathrow. But the people who were with me were from Senai in Brazil. I guess the team, there they are now, they've just shown up on my left-hand side. And we were talking precisely about what Cisco can do in this case to get behind Senai, which I guess is one of the most ambitious programs for skills development that I've seen anywhere in the world. And the great news is that we found a number of ways forward. So to begin with a kind of showstopper, really, not very long ago, last year, a key report on talent management reached this conclusion, that in the next 3 to 5 years, so many economists predict, we'll just run out of talent. Our demand for globally minded talent will simply exceed the supply as the baby boomers generation moves on, retires, and future generations enter the workforce. And if that doesn't leave you with a kind of chill in the heart, I don't know what will, because it suggests that our current economic trajectory around growth and innovation may simply not be sustainable. Cisco is one company, I know there are many others all around the world, who are constantly asking themselves, what do we need from graduates joining our company? We employ in about 170, 180 countries. And is there any sign that those needs are going to be met by today's graduates? So the most recent work on this that we've seen is a major survey of 400 hiring executives of companies with a global remit. And they were asked if most students graduating from schools and universities are really ready to work in their companies. You can see the collective answer. It's not encouraging. They thought that on the whole, students were not ready to pick up the challenge and work in today's globals. And according to the report, graduates lacked basic skills, but perhaps particularly important, these higher level capabilities, higher level applied skills. That's certainly Cisco's view. We look around the graduates coming to our company, and we would say that in terms of those higher order capabilities, we're not seeing necessarily what we need. So the ability to solve complex problems, the ability to think critically, the ability to work in teams, and not just a physical team around that table there or that table there, but often international teams linked by new communications technologies, trying to solve real problems in real time. And if I had to define my job, I think it's a bit like that. So we don't necessarily see people arriving with those skills. We don't necessarily see people coming globally aware, sensitive to what's going on around the world with the customers that they're addressing. It's not a great time in early October 2011 to be selling education technology systems, in my case, or anything to governments that have been profoundly affected by the Arab Spring, if those governments are still there. Sometimes they're not. No doubt within a year's time, it will be a great time to be back on the road selling those things. But we're looking for people, and it's a crude example, but I think it's telling. We're looking for people who are alert to what's going on in the world around them and have an instinctive sense of where there is opportunity and need and responsibility for a Cisco to go and where you pull back, how you balance your portfolio. So those global sensitivities are vital to us. And I think also leadership skills, the ability to influence, to persuade, to communicate, to see the big picture and the big vision. Once upon a time, we needed those things in 40-year-olds. Now we need them in people in their mid-20s. And if we have a particular problem, very often, it's with those young people who have come through an engineering background. Some of them have the ability to solve the most complex problems and often to work in teams. But some of them may lack the more basic abilities to organize their work themselves, front up in the right way to customers. So these are Cisco's issues as we look for the next generation of employees. And I think, therefore, we would echo this survey. But when I said this just the other day to Sir Eric Thomas, who's Vice-Chancellor of Bristol University here in England, he said, have you forgotten what it's like to be 21? What is it about today's companies that they are denying young people the ability to build up these talents over 10 or 20 years? Why must they be there from day one in the early 20s? And that's a good challenge, but I believe a challenge that colleges and schools and universities and companies like my own should face and own rather than simply say, this is too hard. We do feel that learning has changed quite radically, and therefore, as we look for the young people who will become the employees and the leaders of tomorrow, we need to recognize the new world in which they live and enable them to learn in new ways. Specifically, we see students as digital forward scouts, digital natives, as we sometimes say. We've come to see learning itself not as something you do alone in a monastic cell, but as part of an active collaborative process. We've recognized that students who are not motivated will learn less well and are typically better motivated when they're able to study the things that they themselves are passionate about, where their own life beliefs center and life hopes. We think that learners do bring, as I say, their own knowledge and experience to challenges and follow different learning routes to the same outcomes. And it would be great if we respected that. And we think that to be effective, knowledge should be authentic, real-world based. It should be integrated and whole. So Cisco's point of view, as we begin to move out into the world of education to support it with technology, networking and communications, which is what we do, is, I think, to recognize that that's the world we play into. Here's how we think about the problem as we support school systems, college systems, university systems in countries around the world. Firstly, I suppose the coming together of three things. The recognition that the goals of learning are changing and that students need to acquire these higher order capabilities. The realization, which we see everywhere we go, it doesn't take long to have a conversation with Senai, because everybody feels the same way. The realization that we are at an inflection point now in education. There's a global realization of the need for change. And then a recognition that technology is a vital enabler. It's not the first thing. It only enables the educational outcomes, but it does seem like it's pretty important in the sense that it accelerates the process and now can do much more than automate learning. It can, at best, transform it. So we have thought, and we have built our education efforts around four pieces, and I'm going to speak briefly to each of them. The first is the Cisco Networking Academy. The second, if I can bring it on, is a set of global programs and partnerships. The third is a set of unique engagements in countries around the world. And the fourth, finally, and only then, a set of technology solutions and services that are the engine for our work around the world. So first, the Networking Academy. The Networking Academy, as some of you will know, provides to young people networking and communication skills at two levels. And we work in 165 countries with 20,000 instructors, and we embed our offering into existing institutions, whether schools or colleges. We have reached 4 million students plus. 100 million online examinations have been taken in 10,000 and more academies worldwide, working in multiple languages. So one of the things that we're doing is offering these important skills to youngsters around the world, but also by running that kind of international program, we ourselves are learning about what good 21st century teaching and learning actually looks like. Secondly, our global programs. Bob Schwartz at Harvard was a critical early contributor to Cisco's Global Education Leaders Program, GELP. The idea is to work with some of the world's leading school systems to figure out how they can completely rethink the schools movement to which Bob referred over the last 20 years, which is an international movement, to generate a generation of students with 21st century skills with these higher order capabilities. The program works with the Gates Foundation now, with Promethean, the maker of whiteboards, and with Koshland, the American-Australian Foundation. I chair it, but we're currently working with Finland's schools, Korea's schools, Australia's, New Zealand's, and Beijing's schools in order to think about the roadmap to a 21st century system. It's all very well saying, well, we need students with higher order capabilities, but how do you work with your stakeholders, your politicians, your media, your parents, all of whom like education pretty well as it was 25 years ago, thank you very much. How do you work with unions and with the workforce? How do you redesign pedagogy? How do you think through assessment for transformational skills of this sort? How do you get then to a real roadmap for the best systems in the world to get to this destination of higher order capabilities for all? It's a program which has begun in school systems, but we are looking increasingly to move it out into technical and vocational systems, but also into universities. And next stop, Brazil, because in November, the Brazilian team will join the program. But we've also felt that a massive problem in this kind of approach to the generation of higher order capabilities is assessment. We're now seeing schools in a number of countries, including this one, beginning to focus on giving young people these skills. But at the end of it, when they're 16 or 18, it's as though nothing had ever changed. They walk into the school gymnasium one blindingly hot day in June and pick up a pencil and pick up an old-fashioned booklet and begin to fill in examination papers. Now, we've been interested in how you actually assess a young person's ability to solve complex problems in a team. And therefore, with Microsoft and Intel and Cisco and the University of Melbourne, we now have within our grasp technology-based assessments of digital literacy and the ability to solve complex problems, the first prototypes of which will be available in the new year. Then we've taken some of these pieces and made them into the engine of Cisco's commercial education practice. And I represent that transition, having begun at Cisco in the philanthropy department and now leading the business. So that in a set of countries, Brazil, Mexico, the US, the UK, Saudi and the Emirates, Australia, and now moving beyond that, we're working with transformational customers, leading school systems, big college systems, and university systems, co-developing this kind of roadmap towards systems which are giving young people higher order capabilities. And then, of course, putting in place the technology architecture that actually gets them there. This is work which began small. It began in New York City just 4 years ago in a couple of schools in Midtown Manhattan, developing a new approach to pedagogy. But it gave us the confidence to run these ideas as methodologies and drivers for our entire global business in education. And it now plays into a wider Cisco philosophy that our task as a company is to help leaders in every sector develop answers to their most fundamental business problems using intelligent networking and applications. So finally, we are then mapping onto these great aspirations, sets of technology solution portfolios, which might be to address teaching and learning, administration and management, safety and security, or in other sectors, research and knowledge, which would certainly cover Senai's aspirations, but also those, obviously, of the university sector. And then putting behind that what we call whole offers, the ability to bring partners, consultancy, and appropriate pricing and licensing and implementation services so that we go beyond the consultancy and the development of vision and strategy to actually making it happen. So I'm very grateful to you for letting me speak for a few minutes about how we see the problems that you've gathered today to consider, and I look forward to working with many of you around the world in the months to come. Thank you very much.
Before you go, thank you very much. This morning, I don't think you were present for, but we had Cap Gemini here who talked about actually changing the way that they look to recruit. And quite fascinating, really, for professional services, because you thought they'd be the last set of people to do this. And rather than just expecting everybody to have a degree, graduates, they've reached beyond that to great success, actually. So I'm just wondering what Cisco are doing to maybe reduce that snobbery and reach out to a wider community for the benefit with those people that may have those communication skills, but not necessarily the academic ones.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I need to stand my ground to some extent. Yeah. I mean, there are 50,000 people working for Cisco, and I confess that until June there were 62. So we too have had to pull back. But I stand my ground by saying that the kind of work that we're doing and working with chief executives around the world and their CIOs does require higher order skills, which in today's world are typically delivered by a tertiary education of quality. What we do find is that very few systems in the world, if any, are leading their young people in a systematic way through the primary phase, the secondary phase, and the tertiary phase, and saying, how do we build up your skills all the way? Some countries will do that at higher, some at primary, none will think of a pipeline. I suppose the most generous answer I can give to your question, though, which has to be right, is how does Cisco work with an ecosystem of partners wherever it goes? And in our case, and in my case, running the education practice, that's about technology partners, and it's about education partners. And we need to make sure that we are employing, and our local employers, of people with a very wide range of skills. And when we actually have an obligation to transfer those skills to them, often taking some of our best engineers and putting them into local training settings. So I think Cisco has that kind of big tent responsibility to diversify its skill base across a wide population.
Well, we'll be seeing you back on the panel, so thank you very much in the meantime. Thank you to you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you to Michael Stevenson. OK, we have two other short presentations coming up now, and I'd like to introduce you to Don Carlson, who's the Director of Education at EMEA at Autodesk, and a global leader in 2D and 3D design technology, of which we need to definitely improve the awareness and increase the value of design right throughout this country and also around the world. So please, without any further ado, give a very warm welcome to Don Carlson. Good afternoon, Don. Welcome to the forum. Thank you.
Good to be here. Thank you. Well, good afternoon. A couple of things I want to mention is first off is when we talk about Autodesk, how many people know who Autodesk is? And they typically look at you and they say, well, I think I've heard of you, but I'm not quite sure. And you say, AutoCAD. And they go, oh, yeah, I know AutoCAD. You're that engineering company. And that's what you do. You do that engineering stuff. And it's almost like we as a company have the same issues that the engineering group has in terms of who we are and what we do. So I want to look at this a little bit differently today. And I want to show you just a little clip here about talking about who we are. I don't want to give you the stats on our turnover and how many people we have and all those sort of things. I want to show you a little bit about what we're about around the Imagine, Design, Create area and how we as a company really need to move this discussion away from being a siloed engineer, a siloed architect, a siloed consultant. So just without further ado, maybe what I'll get you to do is just run the video clip for me. Now, what you saw there was an example of work that was done by our customers and our partners. Every piece of work there was done by them. That doesn't necessarily mean it's vaporware and it's like, oh, that was kind of... One of the stages actually that you saw that was being built, that was actually the Bon Jovi stage that was designed and built by one of our customers as well as they went through and designed that whole product. So what we look at now is to look at this idea of our customer and partner base. There's 10 million customers, partners, people that use our software every year. We have an enormous base. We have an enormous requirement from them asking for trained and, quote, valuable resources that they can tap into to actually help them drive their business, especially around this design and create area. It's not necessarily just about the technical skills that they're asking for anymore. It's about this whole cycle of how are we creating and developing students and human capital to actually go through a design cycle, or if you want, a workflow from beginning to end. And part of this workflow, when we look at it, could be something as simple as talking to an architect. I have an architect on my team, and I kind of simplify it down, and I say, well, what do you do? He says, oh, I need to build, and he gets right into the technical detail. I said, no, I think what you do is you have an idea in your head, and you need to put that idea into that slab of land over there. I think that's really all you have to do. And he goes, yeah, I guess that's true, I do. But how do you go through that process? And what is the first step in that process? The first step is generally the design area. And when you look at the relevance of what we're talking about here in design, just to give you an idea, although we're supporting the CAD area here at the WorldSkills Forum, 23 of the skill sets, categories that exist in the skill event today are using our technology in some one form or another, including landscape gardening. So we're not just talking about a relevance only to engineering, only to architecture. There's a whole skill set and a base that goes out much broader than that as we look through it, especially in this idea of sustainability. This idea of how are you creating sustainable workflows? How are you creating a more sustainable environment? And these students are expected to solve some of the most complex problems that exist today using the skill sets that they have that may or may not be taught at schools. And that's what we're seeing today is a requirement from our customer base and from our partner base that says we need strong problem solvers. Not unlike what Cisco was talking about before, people that can solve problems, generally starting with design. Now, in terms of our approach to this, and we heard it earlier today, when we talk about working with students from an Autodesk perspective and the learning process, there needs to be context. We need to have context about what they're learning and why they're learning it. And this project-based approach is absolutely critical when we look at it. And this is why we support WorldSkills. It is a great example of a project-based approach, so they're not learning a skill, a technology, an idea in isolation of what the end result is. And these are some of the other projects that we work with right now in terms of the Formula Student Event, the Shell Eco Marathon. These Shell Eco Marathon teams getting 5,000 kilometers to a liter of petrol in a vehicle. Now, if only we could take that and say maybe we get 500 kilometers in a production car. How great would that be? But they're putting it in context of a problem they're trying to solve. Formula Student, great event. These are some of the top engineers that are around, and there's about 100 teams that participate in Silverstone here in the UK, in Germany, and in Italy. And these students are given really an assignment at the beginning of the year. Here's your assignment. Go build this Formula Student car and go race it on the racetrack. Now, they just don't run away and go find the technology build and start typing away on the computer for it, because there's a whole skill set that goes around to that as a team, and there is a team environment in that. They also have to build a marketing plan. They also have to present the marketing plan. They have to get sponsorship. Some of these teams get over $100,000 in sponsorship of their car. That takes a completely different skill set, but again, it's within a project-based environment as they're moving it forward, just as an example. The other thing that we look at as well is this from our customer base and from the industry, is this idea of validation. Our customers and our partners are telling us, the students coming out today, we need to understand that there's some sort of third-party validation that exists there, not only on the soft skills, and obviously that's, when I say soft skills, it might be the collaboration, the leadership, the communication, but around the actual technology now as we go deeper. And much like Cisco, we have a program that actually runs that out as well, and we partner very closely with the Senai group in Brazil on this to make sure that we can actually present and deliver not only the training but the certification that gives those students a solid industry's qualification that they're actually looking for. The other thing we look at is this idea of online content. What do? We know the students of today, and for those of you that were maybe in Calgary or heard Don Truscott talk about the students of today, and you heard from Cisco earlier around where the students live today, and I'm not going to get into all of that. They're really looking for an environment to allow them to learn just in time, just on demand, when they're ready at the place that they're ready at. So what we want to do is we want to create online content. We want to create materials that are relevant for those students, again project-based. This is an example of our sustainability curriculum that we have, freely available, completely downloadable, and gives students an idea of how to solve a problem in a project-based environment that really has a strong effect on what happens in the environment. The other thing I want to mention around the online content, and I know this is, I don't expect you to read this, it's very small, is what we're calling the STEAM workshop. We heard earlier this morning, for those of you that were here, there's a lot of talk about STEM, science, technology, engineering, math. We talk about STEAM. We add the A, and we add the A because of the arts. And this is part of the design function that we've been talking about. It's absolutely critical that the arts comes into the STEAM initiative, because that's where you get your innovation. That's where you get your design problems sorted from. And this, what we have now is this workshop, again, project-based, being developed right now for the UK in the digital design and technology area that has been a prime initiative for the last 10 years and is now going into the next round of this for the next 20 years. And we'll continue to build with that and partner with the government here to make sure that we create content that is relevant for the outcomes of what's required here in the UK as well. And again, something that's used online, anywhere, anytime, project-based, understood, and relevant. The other thing I want to talk about is another program that we have that we work very closely with is our Student Expert Program. This program here, we started just a few years ago, and we've been ramping it up quite a bit. These are the best and brightest students that we have in the schools that we work with. And these students, we had one event where we brought them together. We had about 100 at the time. This was about a year ago. We had 100 student experts across Europe. We brought them together, helped with the technical training aspect of it. But these students probably know more than, some of them anyway, know more than our application engineers inside our company from a technical perspective. But the key to this as well is as our student experts continues to grow as a program, because we have now close to 300 of these student experts around Europe, and we'll continue to grow it, is these students have incredible skill sets around their presentation, their communication skills. They actually work very, very closely with our partners and our customers. We had a building information modeling seminar that came out a couple of weeks ago, and we had probably 400 customers and partners in the audience, and we had a design slam, and we had 3 groups of these student experts up at the front. And they designed a building from scratch, basically, through this whole process, and the way they went through it was just incredible, to the point of, after they were done, there was a rush on stage, and it looked like you were sitting at a blackjack table with the cards going out as everybody was trying to give these cards to their students to ask and see if they were done their studies yet and if they could come work them for a while. And that key point of that is not about the technology that was there, but about their ability to communicate and their ability to show and demonstrate that they have a skill set that's required. We'll continue to grow this program. As I said, we have about 300 of them. We also have a faculty expert program that goes with that to make sure that the faculty that are working within this concept continues to grow and evolve, and we make sure we link them with industry. This is a key for us. While we can bring some students into the organization, I think what it allows us to do is scale this a little bit further and getting even further students out into the community and into the programs of the partners and customers that we have. And finally, I just want to leave you with one other project that we've been working on, and this just happened last July. We've been working with Ferrari, which is a premium brand, obviously, the last year. They went out and they created a worldwide contest to develop the next hypercar for 2020. And they invited 50 of the top design schools around the world to compete in this event. And this event came together with 7 finalists in July in the Manello office in Ferrari to actually go through and announce the winner. And what you're seeing there are the replicas of the cars that were actually designed and built. And there was an enormous design function to this. We're talking about Ferrari looking at their next car. They're looking for the top designers. They want to understand who's out there, who's doing it. And there was finalists a couple from Italy, had some from the UK, US, Asia. There was a bit of a mix in there out of the 7 finalists along the way as we were going through it. And some of the cars were very slick. Whether these get to production, I thought was irrelevant. It was just amazing to see in terms of what actually came out of this in terms of the program. And we were the only technology sponsor on that particular project. Now, the announcement came through, as I said, in July. And interestingly enough, that was the winning team for Ferrari. And that winning team, when you looked at all the participants that came through, was actually from South Korea. And there was a question that was asked of the chairman at the time, as you can see on the right. You can see Alonso there on the left as he's presenting it as well. And they said, are you surprised that the design competition was won from South Korea? You had 2 teams from Torino, right next door to you. And he said, I'm not surprised. We live in a global world. Ferrari is a global brand. We expect to see this. We expect to see even more of it. And now all of a sudden it raises a question of competition. And how are you competing? And how are we competing? And we see it here all the time, but not just within the UK and within the EU or within Europe. We're now having to compete on a world stage. And this was one of the key things that came out of this in terms of really the requirement to say we're competing on the world stage. From an education perspective, we at Autodesk look at this as well and say, how can we connect? How can we share? How can we bring together the requirements needed for all of us to be successful? Because it's not just about us. It's about everybody in the room being able to come together to work out that solution, which is why at WorldSkills we're very much excited to be part of this and really thank the opportunity to be here and enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.
John, just very quickly, that idea about STEAM actually is possibly a winner when you want to think about getting more youth involved. Because obviously a lot of young people need role models. We were talking again earlier, I know you were present, that a lot of the role models at the moment aren't necessarily the ones that we would like them to be role models. But putting the arts within STEM, yes, you've got to change a few business cards, a bit of branding has got to be done. How much do you think other people around the world are going to buy into that? That actually, okay, we'll accept it's not STEM anymore, it's going to be STEAM.
Yeah, we're finding there's pockets. There's pockets of institutions, there's pockets of companies, there's pockets of individuals that really take this on board now. And we're seeing it more and more, and they're calling it, whether STEM-D or STEAM, there's really the understanding that the design phase, the creativity, the using biomimicry to inspire design is becoming more and more of a key area. You know, inclusive design is a key area for Cambridge University as well here. Northumbria is doing it up here in the UK as well, very strong proponent of that. And we're starting to see it more and more come through, especially in Asia.
Okay, thank you very much to Don Carlson, everyone. Thank you, Don. We have one other short presentation from our global industry partner. I'm delighted to welcome onto the stage Thomas Flown, who's been president of Lincoln Electric EMEA since July 2010. So to conclude the presentations prior to the very short panel discussion, please give a very warm welcome to Thomas Flown. Good afternoon to you.
Yes, thank you, Natalie. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. can move this forward. For those of you who may not be familiar with Lincoln Electric, we are a global manufacturer of arc welding equipment and consumables. We're present around the world with 43 manufacturing facilities in 19 countries, and we're headquartered out of the United States, out of Cleveland, Ohio. Our products are used across a wide variety of industries, and we need skilled personnel to use our products through those industries, from automotive to nuclear to shipbuilding, pipelines and pipe mills, heavy construction equipment, and also in light fabrication as well. And what we see in the future is the fact that there is going to be a demand for over 400,000 welding-related jobs that will need to be filled above and beyond those that are currently there between now and 2019. Here are a couple quotes, again, that talk about the shortage of skilled workers. We've heard about that. I think that's one of the focuses of WorldSkills is how we promote and bring skilled workers forward. And here are two quotes from presidents of unions from the United States and the iron workers, talking about the concern about how keeping technology and bringing technology and having skilled people that are able to utilize the technology to really be available to complete the work. And another quote that I think is very clear of the importance of skilled workers is from the Associated Pipe Fitters Unions, whereby they're talking about massive jobs of installing pipelines across countries, whereby really it comes down to the progress of the work is controlled by the welders and their skills and capabilities. So while clearly not enough, the U.S. Department of Labor is in fact investing in the promotion and development of two-year colleges, the community colleges and vocational schools, to be able to help address some of these requirements going into the future for industry. And also the trade unions are also responding, particularly as it surrounds the discipline and skills of welding. Many of the unions, there are now over 1,000 dedicated welding schools that are focused on, again, the development of skills of welding. And these are apprenticeship programs, so it creates an alternative for the students where they can actually start and be paid as they learn and come out with two-year degrees as well as skills and journeyman's licenses. From an industry perspective, we're also responding in the sense of really looking and working with the educational institutions to make sure that what is being taught in these curriculums is appropriate to industry. In fact, some of the funding is actually tied to these institutions to have industry specialists on their advisory boards before they're actually be funded. So we look towards the education process and the various institutions to provide them with materials and support to make sure that the key issues of industry are truly being focused on. And again, it's more than just the actual skill itself, but having an understanding of what industry's needs are in terms of the safety requirements, the quality requirements, the productivity requirements that enable companies to be successful, and make sure those students are getting exposure to those concepts as they go through these programs. So again, we have a strong commitment to not only the students themselves, but also looking at the instructors and opening up our facilities to them to be able to come and participate in our training programs as we work with the students so that they can look at how we are approaching and have access to the materials that we are using to train welders in the U.S. And that goes as far as even providing complete curriculums that look at all the processes of welding. We do pre-test evaluation, post-test evaluations, focusing on all the various aspects and processes within the industry, and these are available at no charge to teachers in industry. And supporting materials as well. Again, there's a nonprofit foundation that was established by James F. Lincoln many, many years ago to provide nonprofit low-cost or no-cost textbooks, teaching aids, training guides, posters, and the like to help, again, promote the well-roundedness of the programs. There's online support materials. We saw some of that earlier. Again, e-learning opportunities were downloadable type programs that address the individual processes within welding, instructor's guides, and also videos that show and demonstrate the techniques associated with them. And again, a big focus also on the safety side of the business, the arts and sciences, as well as the safety, and even to the extent of making sure that students are aware of the latest standards and regulations as well. But what we've really seen as being important in terms of bringing new talent into our industry is that there are now studies that are showing that career choices or career pathways are being made at a much, much younger age. Even as early as age 14, students are starting to decide, am I going to go the higher education 4-year type program or more of a vocational type approach? So we're looking at accessing these youth organizations and start to providing them with exposure to welding, what type of careers are available for welding, what welding really is. And this is an example of engaging young 4-H students, and again, talking not only about the skill itself, but also taking also a STEM approach where we're looking at the total science, technology, engineering, math behind welding itself. And again, there are many of these types of youth organizations that we're engaging. Obviously, Skills, Future Farmers of America, the 4-H Gen, and now the Boy Scouts of America are actually having a merit badge that is surrounding welding that we're helping them develop. So again, part of the other effort in terms of engaging the youth is developing and promoting a different kind of image to welding. This is kind of the more traditional pictures you tend to see with surrounding welding, the arcs and sparks, the flame, the smoke, and the like. And really, there's more to it than that. And the more modern image that we're trying to build is really about precision type work. It's about the fact that you need computer capabilities and design capabilities, and also even robotics, whereby all of these come from the skill and of welding. And new methods and technologies to attract these new generations. One of the units you'll see here is a virtual welding system, and as we've traveled with this unit around the world, we get a lot of activity from the younger generation. This is the kind of medium that they're more used to and are not intimidated by. They're willing to get in there and give it a try. And we get exposure with that. So we've taken that also in conjunction with the American Welding Society. You see a trailer here where it's a mobile unit. We've loaded that up with 4 to 5 of these virtual welders, as well as real welding machines. They're traveling around the U.S. to just gain interest on the parts of the younger generation, give them an opportunity to try a little bit of hands-on, look at a little bit of the results, the capabilities, and some of the theory behind it as well. And this has been very popular and successful. So really, in terms of instead of just talking about our field of welding is more of a traditional career of just simply welding, cutting, and fitting, we're promoting the fact that this is actually an entree to a career path. You can start down this path, but then it'll open up doors in many other areas that will enable you to take a slightly different route than a traditional 4-year type college degree. So, we look to taking this program, which is more mature and been launched really throughout the U.S., and really piggybacking on the WorldSkills agenda on a global scale to start to roll out more and more of these programs around the world in local languages, engaging the educational institutions and vocational schools to, again, basically continue to promote and push the skill of welding and bring a renewed generation into it. So with that, we'll make a short close, and we want to thank Skills London for promoting or for sponsoring this event, and we're a new global sponsor, but very proud to be part of Skills and look forward to a lot more involvement as we go forward in the future. Thank you.
It's about to start the panel discussion very, very quickly at the moment. I mean, you talked about the challenges of welding this morning. There are not enough welders to basically do those infrastructure problems and projects that we have in this country. So I'd imagine from the United States as well.
Globally.
This is a big issue for you as well. Are you making any progress, do you sense, in reaching out, whether it's through social media and youth engagement, that you're starting to turn around what, you know, having a career in the likes of welding can do?
We are making some progress, and again, some of these new medias are helping us in that regard. And we are seeing a lot more enrollment and activity in the vocational schools, and you know, again, in the youth is also engaging more as well. But what we're also seeing is, because of this demand, the compensation for a welder has gone up dramatically. For very skilled welders, and Australia is a good example. You know, they've got a lot of projects on, and a basic welder can make in excess of $130,000, $140,000 a year as a skilled welder.
Where do I sign up? Thomas, if you'd like to take your position, you are going to be on number 6 seat, if you wouldn't mind. If I can invite the rest of the panellists up on stage for just a very quick Q&A session with people from the audience. So if you'd like to welcome our panellists back up on the stage, give them a round of applause to cover the silence as they walk back on stage. If I can get you there, Chris, as well. And next to you, number 1, Chris. Number 1, Chris, thank you. And if you can sit, or are you? I can't see. If you'd like to come this way. You're number 3, thank you. Like to sit on there, lovely, thank you. Next door there, and number 5 for you. There we go, thank you. I think what I'm going to do is open it up to the floor straight away, because I've had a chance to ask a few questions. This lady here caught my eye straight away, well done to you. If you can get a microphone to this lady, and if you can say the name and the organisation you represent. Obviously, I know we're tight for time. There was an element that I wanted to explore, what countries are doing really, really well. Fortunately, you've covered that off to some extent, and we've done that, but over to you.
Yeah, thank you for the wonderful presentations. It is very easy to agree with you all. I'm Seija Mahlamäki-Kultanen from Finland, and I'm very proud to present Finnish vocational teacher education. And this is why I would like to ask you to comment on the role of the teacher, vocational teacher, and how we should restructure teacher education.
It's a very good question, and one we actually covered this morning, but I think we should cover it again this afternoon, because this is something critical to the UK. That what are we doing in teacher training colleges? Are we churning out the same stuff year in, year out? And this is an issue, obviously, that is very, very apparent around the world. Who'd like to take that first of all?
Willingly. I'm not sure I'm best equipped to speak in detail, but the view that we've come to in Cisco, working with countries around the world and across all sectors, is that there's a huge challenge to the traditional teacher to move from the figure at the front, laying out the story and inviting kids to understand it, to the figure who is working with students, who may be working in groups, solving real problems over a longer period of time, maybe 5 to 6 weeks, with the teacher as a coach or mentor to the individual student, understanding what kind of learner they are, how to support them and nurture them off stage, and make sure that they make the biggest contribution they can to a group of fellow students. And we have found in most countries in the world a real blockage about how to rethink teacher training to address that huge shift. And we've been discussing it in Finland with Tino Lankinen, the Director General of Schools, who I'm sure is a close colleague of yours, and I think I saw his name badge at the door when I came in, about what Finland could do, because Finland does have the best school teachers in the world, undoubtedly, recruited from the best colleges, not paid as much as they'd like, but paid a lot, really valued. Everyone who thinks teachers in Finland are fantastic, and yet Tino knows that there's a huge journey for them to take. So this is the identification of an opportunity, a challenge, and very few solutions as yet around the world.
Robert, if I can get you to comment on that one as well.
Yeah, the side of this that interests me is the challenge of exposing teachers. I'm now thinking less about vocational teachers and thinking about teachers more generally, to the workplaces other than schools. And I think one of the roles that employers can play is subsidizing externships. It could be for 2 or 3 weeks. I've seen in Victoria, Australia, several years ago, the Chamber of Commerce there actually funded teachers for 6-month stays to work inside industries with the obligation when they return to their schools to become kind of leaders of professional development, to help other teachers understand how the work world has really changed, why there needs to be more focus in classrooms around collaboration, teamwork, some of the softer skills as well as the more traditional skills.
And Chris, obviously, I've got the utmost respect for teachers, but a lot of them haven't had that exposure to industry, so really don't know what it's like out there in the world of work. I know they come across other people and their partners are working in industry possibly, but there still does seem to be that mismatch of school, training, teachers and industry. They're two worlds.
Yeah, I think we have a term in the UK, and it probably only relates to the UK, so I don't want to offend any other nations, but those that can do and those that can't teach. So I think there's been a big issue about people with experience in the industrial workplace actually going into teaching, as opposed to people going from pure academic study to teach academic study. So I personally think that's one of the big faults in the UK education system, that we breed people just to be academic as opposed to practical, as the Minister was talking about today. So I think there's an emphasis then on people to be encouraged to go into teaching at a much more mature point in their life, after they've had a lot of non-teaching, non-academic experiences. A lot of the people, we talked before about the difficult and sad things that we've had to do in terms of our workforce. The one plus for our regions where we employ people will be, I know, a number of our people who will be leaving the business will actually be going into colleges and teaching, and that will be part of the Enterprise Zone initiative, and we will encourage those people. We also need a lot of help from the government and to go and do that, to do exactly that, to go back into the work, to go back into the training place and help other individuals get to the same level as them.
And maybe question back to you in a way, because Finland has been mentioned a few times in a very great sense, that there are so many things that you're getting right that other countries would like to emulate. So what can we learn from Finland that we can basically steal around the rest of the world?
It's not a very short answer, but I tried to keep it short. So we realized some 10 years ago that we have a problem. It was a starting point, and then we started to work together. Employers and unions and also vocational teachers were involved. And that was, I think, the key issue, that research supported development, administration supported development, and then we have a very authentic and somehow very autonomous teacher profession. So this built the background and made it possible. After 10 years, we have gained huge success in the attractiveness of vocational education, and still we have our problems, but somehow it is built on the societal consensus and autonomous teacher profession. And if you are interested to learn more, so I wish you all welcome to the Finnish department. The number is 287. And I will be there on Saturday from 11, but of course there are other people all the time, so you can visit the department 287. So I'm very happy to welcome you all.
That's a very generous offer as well, and obviously, you know, as I said, Finland have been a great example, but it does take 10 years, and often, you know, governments elected 4 to 5 years. We need that longer term view as well, and the work is still to be done. Thank you very much for your comment there. Any final question I can take? I'm going to take from this gentleman here. This is going to be the last question we take. If you say the name and the organisation you represent. Good afternoon to you.
Thank you. My name is Ehsan Jamil, and I represent Aman Foundation. We have a vocational training institute in Pakistan called Aman Tech. I was looking at two issues that came up in the various talks today. One of them was, of course, about the vocational training status issue, that people tend to pursue academic careers. And the other one, from a third world perspective, is in Pakistan we have 65% of our population under the age of 30. And we are looking at the West, in which you have negative population growth rates. So on a large scale, we think in so many years, these people are going to be required to be skilled and take up some of the jobs in the West. And when we link that to the status issue, people from the third world are dying to be able to get a job in the West because you get to earn 5 or 6 times more than you would, say, in a job even in Toyota in Pakistan. So I'd like to hear from the panel as to how do they think about these two issues, because the status issue, till such time as you can fundamentally pay a lot, as much as a banker, you will still have this challenge. Thank you.
Do you want to answer that?
Well, in Brazil it's interesting because there are some professions, some skills that nowadays they pay more than a lawyer that graduated from a low class or medium class university. So there are some skills in Brazil that they are becoming more attractive to have a skill certificate than a bachelor's certificate in a sense. So for us, it's a matter of stimulating and spending more on communication in order to stimulate the younger population to learn a skill in Brazil. This is one thing that we have to take into consideration, because in our case, we have a huge market. We are, of course, in huge demand for engineers, but there are some professions, for example, civil construction, oil and gas, and so forth, that because there is a difference between demand and supply, the salaries are high. So it's much more a matter of how you get in touch with the young population and try to stimulate those populations to learn a skill. Of course, probably in the future, this young will tend to do a bachelor degree or follow a career, but nevertheless, we believe there are a lot of space.
Thank you. Don?
Yeah, I think when we look at it from the organizational perspective, it's really trying to understand the rationale, I guess, for why people are getting into the roles they are, and trying to find out a little bit more around what's happening in country almost. And we talked about it earlier about it's almost like a marketing exercise. You know, we see it all the time. We see it all the time in terms of you start talking about, I'm going to be an engineer and I'm going to, and people's eyes start to roll back or they kind of go, oh, geez, you're in that hole over there. And that really doesn't have much to do with actually changing the world. And I think it's an awareness of really what the relevance is of what you can bring. I'm not saying that that's the only thing, but I think from our perspective, we're seeing it's much more of an engagement from that area.
And Thomas, this ageing population as an issue, a very timely comment.
Well, yeah, I think, we see that playing out in spades in our industry, particularly, as you say, the image gap that exists, that is traditionally classified with the welder is such that, there isn't a lot of youth that's coming in and seeking a job in that area. It's part of my comments for how we're trying to change that image. But again, the demand side for those skills is we are seeing a lot of the work in those areas that are being taken from developed countries and are developing countries and doing work in the developed countries, and it's changing the dynamic a little bit. But I think it's going to be a long road before that gap is closed, and I think there's going to continue to be demand for those kind of skills, and we're going to see that coming from developing countries for some time yet.
Okay, and I'm going to get a quick final comment from all of the panellists. So I'm sorry we've got a shortened panel this afternoon. Just want to give your sort of final thoughts to the audience. What would you like them to take away when they leave this conference? Sort of those final thoughts you'd like them to do or think about? Because we've got, obviously a very sophisticated audience that are often preaching to the converted. So what are the next steps? If I can ask you, Chris, to begin with.
Yeah, well, I think the economic success of any country is dependent on its business and industrial base. And I think the industrial base has to be fed by quality trained, skilled individuals. So I think you've got to always look at that in balance, and therefore business, academia and government have to be at one. I think when they're not at one, then you get a poor system output. When they are at one, you get a very vibrant economy and a happy nation.
Thank you, Chris Boardman. Same to you, Robert Schwartz.
I think everywhere I go, people complain about the huge challenge of giving much more attention and support to the whole notion of careers we've set up a kind of false dichotomy between kind of academics and careers. My view is that we need to invest much more helping young people from a relatively early age start thinking about their careers, thinking about vocation, understanding that while some careers may require them to go to a four-year institution, other perfectly satisfactory careers that pay well and can, on which you can lead a very satisfying, fulfilling life do not require those paths, giving people enough information so that young people and their families can make intelligent choices.
And Frederick Suarez.
Well, from my point of view, the first things that we should acknowledge is that the expansion of any offering of skills, courses, and programs in a country must take into account the industrial demand and the market demand, because otherwise, this is a sort of something that we have been pursuing over the decades, is otherwise we're going to graduate people with no purpose. So skills must be linked to industrial demand and market demand by any chance, and must follow this path. So this for us is a big challenge, because if we're thinking, in the case of Brazil, of doubling the offering of vocational training, how do we guarantee the quality and at the same time follow the right directions in terms of aiming at the right demand of the market?
Yes, not just about quantity, it's the quality has to remain in place. And Michael Stevenson.
Thank you. I think some of the things that Bob talked about earlier have had a very, very perverse effect on our world. That is that after the great school reform movement of the last 2 years, we have too few young people addressing the world of work with a very academic bias. And oddly, businesses like my own and those on the panel are increasingly feeling that we're more interested in expertise and capabilities rather than the output of that academic system. And what's required, and it'll take a lot of policy thinking and a lot of political bravery, is to see the nurturing of young people as a process that begins in the primary phase and goes to the secondary phase and then to the tertiary phase, and equips far more of our young people to really take on the challenges of the 21st century workplace. And it's because we see it that way, and because our company is dependent on a change, that we don't want just to drag the best people from this country and that country to California. We want to help stimulate education and training in countries right around the world, to employ in countries right around the world. It's just a different mindset.
Yeah, and it's a mindset that we need to shift to. Thomas Sloan, please.
Yeah, I think the theme plays out as has been mentioned here a few times. I think it's important that we continue to promote the trades, the vocations with the younger generation, so that they really do understand that there are alternatives, and you don't have to have a four-year degree or go down the four-year degree path to be successful in life, and show them and talk about the type of work that's accomplished by the vocations, how great countries were built from people with those skills, and the fact that those skills are still in very high demand and represent an alternative approach to the traditional image of, I must be an engineer or a doctor or a lawyer to be successful in life.
And Don, I mean, you talked about, going through your company and some amazing examples with Ferrari. Really, isn't that good enough to get that public image? But you suggest otherwise, that you really need to raise the image and profile of what you do. So if you've got a great challenge, there's a huge challenge for the rest of the world. So final thoughts from you.
Yeah, we'll continue to do this, because obviously if we don't get the skill set that we need as an organization, we won't necessarily succeed as strongly as we need to. And the other thought I had as we were going through this is, we shouldn't be trying to do this in isolation. There is a wealth of information and people that came through these doors today that spoke, and everybody seemed to have a common theme, but with their own bent on it. And I would hate to see that we walk away from this and go back to our silos and try to solve it on our own, because that's not what we do. That's not what we can do. And I think this idea of creating the partnerships and continuing to create those partnerships and tackle this as an industry, as a government agency, but always keeping that student at the center of that experience should be critical for us.
And that's a very good point, because I remember coming back from Calgary, the momentum was there, and you need to do something about it. And I hope you feel the same way when you come through the London experience and go back to whatever country you represent, to get that momentum going, because please do it, because without you, then we will never get anywhere. And we really do need to raise the profile of vocational education and training alongside academic, and celebrate the success of everybody to raise all those skills. And we are going to finish off now. If I can ask the panellists to remain seated, as a special thank you, I think they've done all very well. I'm going to present them with my own medallion of excellence. So we have a badge for each of you here. So today you've seen and heard Mr. Chris Boardman, Managing Director from BAE Systems from the Military Air and Information side, Robert Schwartz, Professor of Harvard Graduate School of Education. We've also seen Rafael Lucchesi, but representing him, Frederic Soares. I think we can give you two, can't we? We might be able to spare another one. And Mr. Michael Stevenson, Vice President of Global Education for Cisco Systems. Mr. Thomas Flown, President of EMEA for Lincoln Electric. And last but not least, Mr. Don Carlson, Director of Education for EMEA as well, with Autodesk. Before you leave, I've just been handed a note. There's a reminder that the Global Skills Marketplace seminar sessions will be going on tomorrow. There are still spaces for people to register for the sessions, and you can do that on your way out. Thank you very much for being a very attentive audience, for your questions as well, and of course my speakers and panellists. Enjoy the rest of your WorldSkills. Thank you.